Hello, my name is Max, and I am here to talk about my D&D campaign, The Chronicles of the Lizette, and more specifically, what my characters have missed. For the purposes of the campaign, all of these things are not canonized because D&D is a collaborative storytelling situation. The fact that they did not find these things means that they are not real and are not canonized. So if you are a player watching this video, which you probably are, don't worry about spoilers. None of this matters. This is not real. These are just things that you could have found that maybe would have affected how you thought about things, but probably not. These are mostly just little, set dressing things that I thought would be fun to have immortalized forever. So just to start, The Chronicles of the Lizette is my D&D campaign that has been running since September 25th, and right now it is November. So it's been running for a few months. We've only had 5 sessions, about 4 hours each, so only so much can get done in those amount of times, and I do a lot of prep for all of them. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is the first choice that any of them really made. The first thing that happened in the Lizette was a flashback to all of the characters' moments that sort of defined them. For Captain Orla von Baudelaire, Shining Pearl of the Sea, of course it was the day that she became captain of the Lizette. For Jackie, it was the day that they decided to leave home. For Caspian, it was the choice to join Orla as her crew. For Nessie, it was the day that they became a part of the Fathomless. And for Liam, it was also the day that he decided to leave home. So all of these moments were all flashbacks. These were already set in stone. These things would have happened no matter what. The characters did not have any agency over what happened, even though it might feel like it, because the players knew what had to happen to get the players to get the characters to where they are now. So the first actual choice that they made was the choice to go to Avastin and sort of set up for their next adventure, or to go straight to their next adventure. These players, of course, chose to go directly to Tixonet, where they began their first adventure with the Necromancer's Jamboree, and to meet Atlas Miller and all of those fun things. What would have happened if they went to Avastin is a little bit differently. They would have met Jackie's grandparents immediately. They would have also been introduced to Adam immediately. Adam was going to be at the Leaky Rib Cage no matter what, and he was going to try and get as far away from Avastin and Nima as possible no matter what, so they would have had him for the adventure. And if Adam had been there for the meeting of Atlas Miller, he had a few things that he was going to say. He had actually heard of Atlas Miller before, so he would have had a few things to sort of imply about him, but because they met him later on, they didn't think to ask him those questions. He was not as involved in the capture and the dealing with of Atlas Miller as much as he would have been if they'd gone to Avastin first. Also in Avastin, they would have heard rumors of Atlas Miller before they even got there, before they got to Tixonet. And I think that the players made the right choice in the fact that they went to Tixonet immediately and met Prim and went to the Grand Briar, that's not what it's called, but they went to the first town and met Prim. And I think that was the better choice to go into it blind, but if they had gone to Avastin, they would have been able to prepare for the mission better. The next thing that kind of impressed me about these players is that they will do anything to avoid combat. My last campaign, Carson Drive, was all about combat. They fought one thing pretty much every session, so having players that are willing to go around and avoid battles as much as possible is really interesting for me. So when I was setting up the Atlas Miller fight, the first one where they have gone to where they go to the rocks and they have to fight all of the skeletons, they would have found things on the skeletons as they were defeating them. So when they were going to fight the first skeleton, when they crossed through the barrier and made them all attack, they would have found little carvings on the bones. They would have found little necromantic sigils and things like that. And that sort of goes into something now where Bella Winifred just sent Liam a letter of a questionnaire, and one of the things she asks is, do you have any sigils on your skin? And that's sort of a go back to where if they had actually looked at the skeletons instead of just throwing them off the little island that they were on, they would have found little sigils, and they would have been able to figure out what those meant and sort of what kind of spell had happened, and also they would have been able to trace it back to Atlas Miller before he showed up and things like that. That's another fun thing, is that the necromantic spells have a lot to do with writing and sigils and things like that. It's very exciting. Another thing is Adam. Adam, they haven't asked him a whole lot of questions quite yet. I know Caspian has started to break the ice a little bit with that. They have kind of the baseline of what happened to him. But if they had asked him more questions in the actual tavern, they would have realized that he is, this is not canon, by the way, this is not canonized. Right now he is a sweet person, and he would probably stay a sweet person. But if they had continued to try to question him, he would have assumed, incorrectly, that they were with the Hustu guards, and would have tried to attack them. So if they had continued to press him about questions and things like that, he would have gotten very angry. And he is a cleric, and they know that, and he is mostly healing spells, but if you've ever played cleric, you know that clerics do have a lot of powerful abilities. Again, not canon, but interesting stuff to know. Most of the second session, which is what we're on right now, is them getting robbed by a group called the Black Abandon. The Black Abandon is a reference to my other pirate campaign that I ran a couple years back. The whole reason I wanted to do another pirate campaign is because I knew that I could do better, and I already have done so much better, but I just wanted to, like, a throwback to my past life, you know, the Black Abandon. And now, of course, that was entirely improvised. They were not supposed to get robbed at all, but because Liam was going around shouting what ship they were a part of, and how they were all at the tavern and no one's on the boat, of course someone was going to rob them. And so they have been back to Avastin the one time, but there is more lore to be learned about the Black Abandon now that they are canon in my mind. So watch out for them. So this is entirely changed now. Just if you're a player watching, this is not real. But what was the plan is if they had gone to Nema and had taken the bribe from Atlas Miller and had left, which was a possibility that I considered and was planning for. If they had tried to leave Nema, they would have run into Antigone, and Antigone would have asked for their help a little bit more emphatically than they were taking it. The whole idea was that they needed to stay on Nema to solve the problem. But if, again, they just took the money and ran, I was going to have Antigone run into them and ask for help. And obviously that didn't happen. They wanted to help no matter what, which, silly, but Antigone did not have to do that. And so we got to add to Antigone's lore that they had not left their dorm in a very long time because of the fear. And my reasoning that I was going to have was that Antigone had heard through the grapevine, or maybe they had looked out their dorm and had seen Atlas Miller talking to them and realized that these are outsiders, these are people that don't have a connection to the school. Maybe these people can help me and can help find my friends, possibly. I prefer how it ended up. I prefer the fact that they went to Antigone to help them and not the other way around. I think that it works a lot better, but just in case they tried to run away from responsibility, I was ready to catch them. So, for session 3, this was the session where they decided to throw a huge party to distract Atlas Miller and get him out of the tower so that they could investigate and see what the hell was going on. I had to plan for a few different angles that they wanted to try to take it. The first one is that they just busted in there. I was entirely ready for the other two, staff members of the School of Goborn of Necromancy. I had their names. They're not written down anymore because they're not important and they're not canon, and their names are not canonized anymore. But if they had decided to bust in, they would have had a huge fight, which I kind of guessed that they weren't going to do, but I was ready for. And what was going to happen was that the two that were not Alice Miller would have defended their tower, of course, but then Alice Miller would have casted a spell to make them pass out, and then would have tried to fight the Lizette on his own. Which would be interesting character beats, but I'm glad, again, that it didn't happen that way, but I did think it would be interesting because he has so much... Alice Miller is an interesting character in the fact that he thinks he's right all of the time, and he will not take any notes, and the fact that the crew of the Lizette tries to catch him in what he's doing, it needs to be handled on his own, and he could do it on his own. Of course he could do it on his own, right? And it's just an interesting person to think about. Another thing I was planning for them to have Opal Dawn go and distract Alice Miller. It is good that they did not do this, because my plan was that Alice Miller was going to hold Opal Dawn as ransom. And I don't know if they could tell that, but when they didn't do what I had expected them to do, I was a little surprised. But I think it was the right choice, of course. But what he was going to do was, when Opal Dawn approached him, was going to say a few words to him and try to get him out of the tower. And the moment that he realizes that Opal Dawn is trying to get him away from his tower, he was going to kidnap her and sort of use her as a way of saying, hey, I have someone that I could hurt. And it would be pretty bad for you if something happened to Opal Dawn, right? And of course the players would have had to navigate around that and probably would have had to fight him to get Opal Dawn free. That was the branch that I had planned for. Of course, it did not happen. Instead, they threw a freaking rager, and on the way, Liam met Bella Winifred. Winifred was a character that I had planned for. I always think that having just someone who's a little silly and strange and is antagonistic towards the crew for no reason is always great. Bella Winifred was originally just named Winifred, of course. But then they saw how she acted and asked that she be named Bella, and that's very funny. And of course, I accepted that. I think that's very, very silly. Originally, Bella Winifred's job was sort of trying to freak the crew out. What she was going to do was she was just going to start to appear while they were doing things and be like really nosy and interested in what they're doing, but trying to play it off like she's not interested in what they're doing. But again, I think that the way that she was used was a lot better. I think her having a scientific interest in Liam is the perfect thing for both her and Liam. Something that is canon that my players did figure out after I had to kind of spell it out to them a little bit was the fact that the reason that Beckham Peters' spirit was not in the amalgamation was because they had given him a funeral. And I did say this when we were playing, but I just want to reemphasize, if they had just dumped his body after they were done, or if they just happened to ignore it and didn't search it at all, his spirit would have been a part of the amalgamation. But because they specifically took the time to say like, hey, we are taking this old, gross boat, pushing it out, saying a few words and lighting it on fire and giving him a Viking funeral, of course, they saved him from having to be a villain against his will. Of course, because Alice Miller had possessed him, he was evil and had to do evil things, but of course he never wanted to. He was a librarian. He was the necromantic librarian. This is not what he wanted to do. And the fact that my players were kind enough to take the time and say, like, we are going to take care of this person who clearly was not doing things of his own volition, and we're going to make sure that he has the funeral that he deserves. And of course, that gave them a leg up in the fight with the other amalgamations and the other spirits, and that was canonized. I did say that. Again, this is not canon anymore. This is not, if you ask me, this is not my plan anymore. But this is my plan the entire time. But what I was expecting for them to do was for them to fight the amalgamation and the spirits to disappear, and then they would have to go find the bodies still to try to put them at rest. And they would run into the amalgamation every once in a while. But the fact that they went out of their way to go and grab Antigone and use them as a way to calm the amalgamation down, that's so creative and smart and better than what I had planned. So of course Antigone was able to use the same jar spell that Alice Miller was using, and was able to use it to take their spirit and keep it safe while they figure out what's going on. That's so much more poetic. And some of the themes of the whole game so far is the fact that the dead need to be respected, and that death is a normal thing, and you shouldn't try to bring people back, and you just need to accept that things happen out of your control, and that you want to be your own person, and you don't want to keep hanging on to things that are gone. And the fact that Antigone is holding on to their spirits, I think, is going to affect them moving forward. And next session, that will probably come into play. But who knows? Maybe it won't. Maybe they'll come up with something better. And Opal Dawn was supposed to give them the rings no matter what. Originally, she was going to give them the rings for saving her life, of course, but ended up being just for keeping the peace and letting all of the necromancy school know what was happening and know that Alice Miller is a horrible, horrible person and deserves to be in prison forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. Session 4 was one that I didn't have a whole lot of time to play it for, so there wasn't a whole lot that they could have found outside of what they did, and they were messing around and meeting the Black Abandon again. There was some stuff with the Black Abandon that they were starting to get into with Marianne, but, it's okay. We moved on, and now we have an actual plot hook. So, Session 5 is the Dayglow Manor, and I had a lot of fun with the Dayglow Manor. I created an entire floor plan. I came up with the economy of what happens there. I finally got to put in Adrian Key. I love Adrian Key. I love Lady Sloane of Kailua. I love all of them so, so very much. And the fact that they finally made their little debut made me very, very happy. Adrian Key, of course, if Liam had introduced himself to her, she would have had quite a few questions, and there would have been some interaction with her, and also communicating the fact that Liam is a royal. And of course, he did not introduce himself, and I believe in Adrian Key's head, she thinks of him as a part of the Lisette, and as a part of a ragtag crew, and not as a royal, even though he very much is. So if Liam had introduced himself to anyone, pretty much, at the party, they would have clicked and known who he was. But he didn't, and so now he still remains in shadow. As for the floor plan, there were quite a few rooms they did not go into. I explained a few of them. One of them I'm not going to explain because it will become plot relevant, because I still want it to happen. There was a kitchen that they could have gone into, and they would have seen more sprites, and the sprites in that room would have been more visibly tired if they had not picked up on that already. They would have also picked up a few receipts, and they were receipts on the food that they were buying, as well as the sprites that they were buying. And that would have kind of been, again, a hint to the fact that they were getting them from Loamville, and that Loamville was profiting a lot from the purchase of the sprites to Dayglow Manor. Also, I have not listened to the recording, but if I did not mention, the whole reason it is called Dayglow Falls is because all of the sprites are glowing all the time, and it's just like, Dayglow Falls, Dayglow Manor, the Tideless Pass, stuff like that. Another thing I didn't mention a whole lot of that is not that lore prominent, but I do think this is canon, is the fact that the Tideless Pass is kind of a one-way direction that goes through Kailua and Hustu. And just the fact that it's quite, it's a not super narrow, but it is pretty narrow, and if you keep going down there, you're going to run into checks and things, not like a dam, but kind of like a toll booth, but they just kind of check your boat. That will probably come into play later, but not yet, because I've not gotten that far yet. More rooms at Dayglow was the guest room and the main room, and the main bedroom. The guest bedroom would have just been sort of decorated very neatly. They would have been able to find, again, more stuff on the sprites and Dayglow, more of the receipts. And it would have actually had, I believe it was messages from someone in Loamville to Adrian Key, or one of Adrian Key's servants, the people that work under Adrian Key. And it would have been talking about how these sprites are acting differently. The sprites are acting more tired, and the fact that they need to buy more to keep up, and that's not okay. And if the sprites are not responding to commands, they're not doing what they're supposed to, types of things like that. And it would have just, again, been another push towards the fact that the sprites are actual beings that have feelings, and you need to save them. Of course, these people did not do a whole lot of investigation of my beautiful, beautiful manor, but that's okay because I got to shove them in the right direction anyway with the message spell, which is very creative, with the fact that you use message to communicate verbally, but the sprites don't think verbally, they think in emotions. So of course they were able to share the fact that they are tired and that they are lonely, right? And they're far from home and they feel sad. The last room is of course the main bedroom, Adrian Key's room, where the players would have been able to find more correspondence about the sprites, and more specifically about the fact that they are tied to a family crest. There was a lot of information about the family crest itself, and also about how to get to the treasure room. Again, this was not found in game, so I had to kind of hint and have the sprites take it directly to them and things like that, because it was the sprites were very, very convenient to trying to pushing characters in the correct direction. Again, there was kind of the problem where things just kind of felt like they were thrown out there, but really it was because they're supposed to find things in other rooms that would have led them to the other rooms, but that didn't happen, and that's okay. There was also a bathroom that they could have found, and there probably would have been a person on the toilet, because I do think that was funny. There is some stuff about Ryu that they have not found out yet, but I'm not going to say anything about it because they are still talking to Ryu, and things can still happen. There's also some lore with Benji that, again, I'm not going to share, but hopefully they do find it, because I am very excited about the way that the campaign is going, and I'm just very, very happy. In conclusion, players, please do better. I'm counting on you to do better, because I put so much effort into all of this, and I'm kidding, obviously. Everything's going great, and I'm very happy with how everything's going.